So welcome everyone. First of all, I'd like to welcome Kym Mercer, our first guest to our Lunch with a Local today. Thanks very much for being with us today, Kym.
Not a problem.
Yep. And before we kick along, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which each of us meet today across Australia. For me, this is the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders past and present. Kym, I've come across you through my work through Better Boothby, through your activities in the Boothby area, but beyond. And I was so impressed to find out that you manage a Facebook page with now 60,000 members on managing issues to do with Centrelink and the like. How does somebody find themselves hosting a page with 60,000 followers?
It didn't start wanting that number. When I first started the group, I was on many groups on Facebook, as most of us are, and seeing so much incorrect information on these groups, and groups where people were asking questions, but it wasn't really the group's intent or the group's need. So they weren't getting the correct information, or it wasn't the right places to be asking. And so I started the group with the intention of maybe up to 1,000 people helping to navigate through Centrelink. When I first started it back in 2017, within the first 3 days, we had more than 1,000 members, and it grew at an exponential rate that was, I'd never seen anything like it. So we've grown, I wouldn't say slowly. I've never promoted the group besides when people ask what I do, mentioned it. But it's grown on its own, and people are telling us they're hearing about it in all these, I wouldn't even know where some of these groups are coming from or where they've started. So people are hearing about our group from absolutely anywhere. We were at between 45 and 50,000 members before the COVID-19 struck. And we've gained quite a lot of members since then, especially around all the confusion around what's happening, how we get to where we are, because the system's been broken. It's been broken for a number of years, getting slowly worse and more broken thanks to Liberals since 2014 when they took over. And it's just sad that it takes a crisis like this for them to actually realise that the system is so broken, or to actually try to do something to fix it when suddenly they had 1.7 million intent to claims come in that first week. Yes,
and I didn't get a sense that they were really anticipating that scale, even though the sheer maths would tell you that that's what was going to happen.
That's right. And, we've been fighting, job seeker payment, which used to be called New Start up until March, hasn't been raised now in over 26 years. I think next month will be the 26th anniversary of it not being raised. And what we mean by that is that it's gone up by the CPI every year, or the indexing, but in actual real terms, it's actually not raised the rate, where we know the cost of living has gone up hugely, sitting at $40 a day, but that $40 has to cover absolutely everything that the person needs. And debts don't just disappear when you become unemployed.
Well, but on the ground, and I imagine that you're just hearing the stories of people who are living day to day with these challenges. What has that change to New Start into Job Seeker meant for people?
It's done nothing. The change is purely a name change. It has actually done nothing for them. The only increase was the CPI increase. So they can't even say that it is higher than the old payment was, except for the fact that it had the indexing came in on the exact same day that it was implemented. But the bigger issue with the whole system is that it is not designed for, it's designed for a 1970s model rather than for today. And what that means is it's designed, and the way that the Liberals like to think about welfare is that there's a job for everyone. Well, we know since the 1970s that's not been the case. You've got, one job vacancy for, I think the official total is 9, but that's only unemployed. That's not counting underemployed or people who aren't on the welfare system at all. So the real number is about 1 in 18. So even if every single job before this crisis started was filled, there would still be a huge number of unemployed. You know, so this whole best form of welfare is a job. That's great, but there's no jobs out there.
Yeah, and particularly now. So maybe I misunderstood that. I thought that there had been a change in when they transitioned New Start to JobSeeker, that there was even a financial difference.
No, there's no change at all to the thing. So the only thing is they've brought 4 payments or 5 payments into one. So they brought the new JobSeeker payment encompasses, which is ridiculous in the way they've done it. It encompasses New Start payment, bereavement payment, sickness benefit, and widow's pension, all into the one payment. Oh, and special benefit, I think, all into the one payment. And what that does is it means that if someone now becomes, you know, loses a partner or has a death of a child and would normally go on to bereavement payment, they now need to go on to JobSeeker. And people are not knowing that's what they need to look for when they're looking in the system, where it used to be clearly defined. Just like sickness pay benefit allowance was someone who had injured themselves not at work and couldn't work for a time, and it would allow them to be unpaid from work and still get a benefit while they had a job to go back to. Well, that's now JobSeeker, and that in itself is going to cause people to go, but I'm not a job seeker. I have a job to go back to. I don't know why. The naming of it is not beneficial for what it is, a catch-all payment for Centrelink.
Yes, but is it a catch-all? Are there Centrelink recipients who haven't been brought into that net, and what's been the effect for them?
So basically, if you don't qualify for anything else, they usually put you on JobSeeker. That's the way it works, and why I say catch-all. So you've got, before this crisis started, you had 42% of people on New Start, before this all started, who had a recognised disability who could not qualify for DSP. And they're living well below what they need to live on, because we all know disabilities cost a lot more to live day to day. When you've got medication costs, you've got therapy costs, and not everyone can get NDIS as well.
Yes, so and that's your personal experience is as a carer for a family member with a disability?
Yeah, so my daughter has multiple disabilities. She's got both physical and intellectual disabilities, and it took us 3 years, and I know the system. It took us 3.5 years to get her DSP. You know, so there are many people out there who are still struggling and still trying to get by. And we know that JobSeeker, the government have admitted it's not enough to live on, but people with a disability who don't quite qualify or can't get the right evidence to get off of JobSeeker and onto DSP are being stuck at that lower rate, which is really unacceptable for anyone to be living on. It used to be, you know, they always say it's a transition payment. Well, it is a transition payment if the jobs are there, but we don't have the jobs. And what this crisis has done is it's highlighted the government understand it's not enough, and they're trying to prevent the 1.7 million that they had intent to claims come in. They're trying to prevent them from actually having to live on that $40 a day, because they know it's not sustainable. And this is their big voter base.
Yes, and you help me with the language, because you know the government says that these are temporary measures and they want to revert back. But what you're telling me is that there's not a lot of difference now to what there has previously been. So
the difference is, and the snapback is the supplement. So it started yesterday. Well, there's been a lot of misconception about this as well. It started from reports from yesterday, or processing of your payment from yesterday. So people won't get it till today or tomorrow. It'll be the first lots getting it. And it's actually doubling the rate almost. It's an extra $550 a fortnight. But it's also only for selected groups. So there are some groups that are still missing out. But with that $550, that's only for the next 6 months. At the end of that time, it will revert back to the lower payment that they know is unsustainable to people to live on. They know that you know, with all the modelling, and there's reports, many reports out that show that living on $40 a day actually becomes after 6 months, it actually becomes an impediment for looking for work, or another barrier to finding work, not the opposite. This government have the view of, you know, if we pay them too much, they won't want to work. Well, we know from statistics from areas like Sweden and other countries with higher welfare payments, people are more wanting to work because they're wanting to put back into a system that is going to support them. People are wanting to support systems that support them. But this whole myth of it being a safety net when it won't even cover most people's rent.
Yes, yes. So it's hard for me to imagine that, and it's good that you presented it as, described it as the supplement, because it does communicate the temporary nature it's being presented as. It's hard to imagine that a government could remove this without a mass rebellion.
Well, the thing is, what they're hoping is by the time that this is over, that the time that this supplement is finished, most people who have recently came onto the payment, who have had jobs and have lost their jobs due to COVID-19, will be back working. So the masses that have the voice and that have never, most times have never ever claimed welfare before, are going to be off of it. They're going to be all back working, and it's going to be just back to the voices of the long-term unemployed or those who are too sick to work, that they've been ignoring us for the last few years anyway.
Is that a reasonable prospect? Because the commentators I hear say that the recovery of these situations can be quite slow, particularly employment is a slow recovery process. So would you not expect that the numbers on the job seeker to stay reasonably high even after this supplement?
We do. That's what we're expecting, but the government don't seem to see that. They seem to think, no, this will be over, everything will bounce back to where it began, and everything will be hunky-dory, and everything will be back to the way it was before. But this has been happening for years with the slow automation of people, with the slow, you know, building of, you know, of losing jobs. So automatic self-service checkouts, which cost jobs, and, excuse me, machinery in factories that are replacing people actually working and people actually doing and manufacturing those jobs. And also a big tendency to buy and manufacture offshore because it's cheaper, but it costs Australian jobs. And all of those things are going to mean that, you know, once we get back to that, more people are going to lose their jobs. And that's just the nature of automation. Without a better welfare system, or a universal basic income, or some other form of a job guarantee, or something along those lines, we are going to find that over time, the number of people on welfare is going to grow.
And are you getting opportunities to advocate to government at the moment? And if so, what are you hearing back from them?
So we've been doing a bit of, we do a lot of work, and there's a lot of us out there that do this kind of work. It's all unpaid, so we're all doing it volunteer. So we're doing it around our other obligations. So for myself, it's doing it around my caring needs of my daughter. And I do a lot of it while she has support workers, which at the moment we don't have. You know, and it's just a whole pile of things that just makes it hard. And we can only talk to the politicians that will talk to us. So a lot of the times it's the Greens members, it's the Labor politicians. Often with, you know, I'm in your electorate, so Boothby, so we've got the fabulous Nicole Flint as our member. And yes, that was a little bit sarcastic. But I find that talking one-on-one with her, she sort of, well, she makes it seem like she understands, and then goes into Parliament and votes completely the opposite way. So, you know, the area she's representing has a high number of unemployed, and it still confuses me how she actually won the seat. But, you know, that's for others to investigate, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
But all we can do, you know, whenever I've sent an email to her office, I think I've once or twice got an email back. And, you know, that was only after I'd actually met her that I started getting a few emails back. But even now, if I send another one, it won't get responded to. You just get the general push around of that's not my section, go talk to the Anne Ruston or whoever. And then when you ring those offices, one, you can barely get through. And if you do manage to get through to speak to someone, you're just told, oh, well, we'll let her know, rather than, you know, you're not at, you know, I sent an email asking a few questions back when they were first starting to announce some of this stuff. And the response I got didn't even have a response in it. Didn't address any of my questions or give me any answers to the issues.
Yes, it's frustrating because it's the very time I would think that you want to hear a range of views and voices. And speaking of that, I've had a chance to ask a number of questions. I was wondering if others who are here have any questions they would like to pose. If you could just use the chat feature just to type some questions, and we can put those to Kym.
But yet, for me, the biggest thing, and while we're waiting for this, is also the fact that carers and people with disabilities are being left out altogether. 2 lots of 750 doesn't equate $550 every fortnight. It's about $6,500 over the 6 months that we're missing out on. And all of our costs have gone up as well. So yes, we were on a slightly higher support payment to start with, but we're now going to be the lowest of all of the payments. Even the partnered payments are going to be way more. You know, and it's to the point, you know, we still can't go out and buy the food we need to buy, or we do an order. Often people have special food needs or special requirements, which mean food costs more to start with. Medications that can be harder to find at the moment. Even just buying, you know, cleaning products and stuff that we need for the disability, not just for the COVID, are costing a lot more as well.
Yes, and I assume that you're hearing these stories from...
Yeah, I mean, we've got the point of, you know, some people were working part-time to affect it. They can't work now because the person they care for or themselves are immune compromised. So their workplace is still running and working fabulously. So they're not eligible for the job keeper because they've actually not lost, you know, their employer is still running at capacity. It's not lost their 30 or 50%, but we don't qualify because... You know, so, you know, some people are living on less now than they were living on before.
Yes, yes. And tell me, the other story that has been topical in Centrelink over the years has been the robo-debt. Where has that got to now? Because I know there were threats of court challenges, etc.
Yep, so the court deemed them illegal, and we're still waiting for an appeal on that process. And they've suspended all current robo debts, but the problem is a person still can't, that debt is still there, it's not hidden. And so they've suspended it. They haven't suspended people's payments automatically. If you need to have your payments stopped for the robo debt, you need to call them and get that done, but they're not telling people that. It's only when people are coming across it normally. The other thing we're also finding is that we're finding, and I can see a lot of debts coming out of this whole situation as well. And I'll get to that in a minute, but then we do have a question here from Jim Allen. Hello, Jim. So I wonder if in the next 6 months, especially in the lead up to the October federal budget, is the time to mobilise and push for sustainable income and address blockages and other things. Yes, we are still pushing. We are working with ACOS as well. So I do a bit of work with ACOS and SACOS here in South Australia. Around the Raise the Rate campaign. So while we're doing it, we're still pushing it. This is also showing a lot more evidence-based that we can gather. So we're getting stories now, not only of, you know, how people are struggling, but how much easier their life has got with this extra money. But we're also identifying a lot more issues and blockages, as you say, in the system. And hopefully we can push this through. But this budget, when they finally release what this current budget payment year has been, it is really going to blow out. So to me, blow it out and let's get it. Any government who's working in a negative, who's working with a surplus, is not servicing their people properly.
Yes, I assume that. Yeah, like it's a different time, and it is encouraging to see that there's more of a discussion about, you know, what are the right economic frameworks for a crisis now, but also more broadly.
Yeah, and you know, we've been telling them for years, if something it only took something major like this for them to finally wake up and go, oh, actually, we need to do something about this. And don't for a second think the Liberals don't know that the system is broken the way it is, because they've done that. They called just after this, as soon as when it first started, they were suddenly putting on 5,000 new workers in Centrelink. But if you actually look, they've actually cut 5,000 workers since they started in government. So they're only really replacing what they've already taken. It's like when they say that they're putting, you know, millions back in, they're putting millions into domestic violence services, but they've taken out 3 times or 4 times that amount that they're putting back. They have a nice way of forgetting to mention things like how much they've actually taken out of the system or cut. They just tell you how much they're now putting into the system, whichever system it is, rather than actually the truth, which often is that it's only got this bad because we've cut it to get this bad.
Yeah. And people's experiences now of accessing Centrelink, I even know personally members of my family on those critical first few days, you know, were finding it difficult. Have things improved?
They have improved. Payments are now coming through within 24 hours in some instances. The thing is, if we can do it now, why have we not been doing it in the past? Why has it been that people can be waiting up to 4 months for Job Seeker in the past or New Start? And women fleeing domestic violence waiting 4 to 6 months for payments, which is why we have such a huge rate of women being murdered at the hands of a partner or an ex-partner, because they can't leave. They're not got the support there to leave. And taking months and months and months and a lot of rigmarole and back and forward to get payment to be able to leave safely. You know, we've got a huge issue with people with disabilities not having their disabilities recognised, or they're recognised in one section of Centrelink but not another. So things like if you're putting in a medical certificate for an exemption, they'll tell you they're not going to accept it because your condition is permanent. But if you apply for DSP, they'll tell you don't have enough evidence to get DSP, and try and say that it's not permanent, you know. So it's really, one hand doesn't know what the other's doing. Another issue is around, another big issue that we're finding from this is youth or people under 22 and parental income and the independence test. So if your parents' income is over about 80,000 a year, you won't get any youth allowance. But you might have been working, but now you've got to prove that you were independent enough, even though you've already been working and doing it, but you're going through this time now. I mentioned before debts. There's going to be a huge amount of people with debts when what's going to happen is they're going to get told in a couple of weeks whether their workplace was eligible and able to give them the job keeper payment. But then they need to go back for the whole time from when the job keeper payment started and add in this extra income, which in most cases is going to cut off their payment completely, is going to get them to the point of now they're going to owe back the money that they've just got from the government.
Yes, oh goodness, from this elevated JobKeeper amount that, yes.
Yeah.
What can somebody do to anticipate that? Like, are there lessons that learned about how you keep your records, or?
It's not about that. It's the fact that people need to eat today. Yes. People need to still be eating today. People need to be paying their rent today, not waiting until their JobKeeper comes through in a few weeks' time. You know, most landlords need that money to be able to pay the rent, to pay their mortgage. You know, there's just so many variables that you can't just preempt. And if you report to Centrelink the $1,500 that you're expecting to get once your employer gets it, which again is another controversial thing because apparently they're not going to approve it if you haven't already paid your workers. So there's just all these little loopholes and catches, which means if someone has reported that $1,500 and then they don't get it, you can't go back and report and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I didn't get that money, now you've got to give me back my money. So it becomes a catch-22, and you know, it's just so many things that we were getting inconcise information or conflicting information from the same department. It's like this supplement, this one department will tell you need to report it for something, another department will tell you it's not taxable, another one will tell you it is taxable. We don't know what's happening with it. And for those things, what I recommend people do is don't change anything now. Wait till the end of the tax year, which is only in another it's only in another 2 months. Might sound like a long time, but when you're talking Centrelink, it's only 4 to 5 pays, depending on your pay cycle. And then what you can do then is work out what you're going to do for the rest of the 6 months, because we're not going to know until group certificate or payment summaries start coming through. We won't know how they've actually coding this.
Yeah, gosh, it's difficult times when so many other complexities are going on. I noticed a couple of other comments from Jim as well. It's not just long-term unemployment who are dealing with the broken system. It's also people applying for age pension for the first time, and in some cases they have been swinging or Liberal voters. So how do we harness their outage to get a better outcome harness their outrage to get a better outcome from everyone? Is there an energy that could be tapped into at the moment of new people
We're hoping so, because at the moment it's sitting around the 12-month period for people to get on age pension. That's what it had been before this. What it's going to be now, I don't know. I know they tried to rush and clear backlogs of payments so they could process all these people losing their jobs quicker, which is really sad that we had to get to a crisis like this for them to actually start making people be human and know that people have bills to pay and, you know, food to put on the table and rent to pay if they're renting. But the issue also becomes people can be solitary. They won't, especially that older generation, were often brought up to not complain, to not talk about finances with people they don't know, to making sure that they're doing it in a way that they're not talking about it in public. So they're less likely to put their hand up and say, I want to talk to someone, or I want to have my story told, or I want to be part of this. So it's about trying to change that narrative of we're not complaining, we're just trying to fix the system. And having it so that that when people are applying for payments, regardless of what payment it is, that they're treated equitably, that it's done in a timely manner, and that it is done so that the people aren't disadvantaged even more. So what often happens though is that people will also think that it's just them that's having the issue because they don't talk about it, or they think, oh, it's just because I didn't do this or I didn't do that, because they were brought up that if there's an issue, it's their fault rather than being an external factor. And it's like, you know, you get some older people who won't talk about politics with you on the basis of, you know, they were told you never discuss that kind of thing. Well, reality, that's how we have debates. That's how people put their view across and actually formulate proper views on what we do going forward. Yeah,
fantastic. In our last couple of minutes, we've run a little bit over time, but there's 2 questions I'd like to ask. When this pandemic is over, whatever that time is, what recent changes would you like to hang on to? What would you like to keep about this time? And then what would you like to return back to?
So what I'd like to keep about this time is the speed of processing for payments, for people's safety nets. I'd also like to keep a payment for people that is livable and, you know, means that people actually have some dignity. You know, if you're going for a job interview, but you've not had a haircut in the last 6 years or the last however long because of the thing, you know, you're not presenting as well as you can. you know, new clothes are good clothes when you become unemployed. Don't stay that way very long after years of using them for job interviews. And so therefore I would like to keep all these, not only the extra payments, but I'd like to have a real review of all the system. And that means things like taper rate, things like the threshold that you can earn before you start reducing payments. I'd like all payments increased to at least the poverty line or more. I like to use the Henderson poverty line. That's the more fairer one, but the government will probably use the lower poverty line. And things that what was the other one? What do I not want to come back?
So what would you like to get back again?
I'd like to get back again people being able to see their therapists and see their, you know, actually go and have their therapy and actually get that stuff. My daughter was doing 5 days a week hydrotherapy at the pool at Marion. That's closed. That closed almost overnight. So we were there one day, the next day it was shut. So 6 months for her without therapy, without hydrotherapy, means that she's going to go backwards and she's going to be years behind where she's built up to. So it's taken her 2.5 years to get to where she is with her mobility. Without hydrotherapy for 6 months, she's going to probably be more dependent on her wheelchair.
Yes. So it's the combination of these things that the sooner they can get back, the better for all of us.
That's right.
Thank you so much for your time today, Kym. Our first webinar. This has been a good learning experience today, and fascinating hearing those real world stories of a system that was sort of largely ignored and now is the centerpiece of, and now we're looking at what will be the future of that. So thank you, Kym.
Not a problem. I'm just writing the comments that I'm going to post a link to my, I won't write it now, I'll say. Jim, I'll post a link to my group that I run in the Better Boothby page on this. And I'm also happy to take any questions for people watching this afterwards. If you've got questions you would like asked, you can pop them underneath the post where this is and I'll be able to get to those.